My wife cheated on me with our real estate agent, then manipulated me into signing over $200, $0 in our family house's equity during divorce. Now she's claiming I've abandoned her and our kids, and I just found out she secretly bought a new home with my money. I never saw it coming. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Lisa. We'd been married for 8 years, built a pretty good life together, or so I thought. She was always a little high maintenance, demanding, quick to criticize, but I figured that was just her personality. She loved the finer things, designer clothes, fancy dinners, trips abroad. She always wanted the best, and I was happy to provide it. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing small cracks in the facade, little things that didn't add up. At first, I thought I was just imagining it. She'd suddenly be unreachable during the day, her phone always on silent. She'd come home late, smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, or she'd lie about where she'd been. It was subtle at first, missed calls, forgotten plans, a little too much defensiveness when I asked questions. I brushed it off, convinced I was just paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking, maybe I was insecure. But then came the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew. It started with a simple text message I saw on her phone. I was in the bedroom looking for my charger when I caught sight of her screen. A message from some guy named Mark, a real estate agent she'd been dealing with about a house we'd been planning to buy. Except the message wasn't about a house. It was about something else entirely. Something dirty. Something intimate. My heart stopped. My stomach turned over. I read the message twice, then again. It was explicit talk about meeting up, about sex, about how much she missed him when she was away. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was cheating on me with our real estate agent. I felt numb at first. I didn't yell or scream. I just stared at that message, trying to process what I'd just seen. How long had this been going on? Was it recent? Was I blind? I looked at my phone, at the messages she'd sent, trying to find some clue that this was just a one-time thing. A mistake she'd regret, but there was no denying it. The messages kept coming, revealing a pattern of lies, deception, and betrayal. She'd been sneaking around for months, probably longer, and I had no idea. The worst part was the feeling of betrayal, not just because she cheated, but because she manipulated me into signing papers that gave her access to our house's equity. That's what really cut deep. We had a family home, a place I thought we'd build our future in. But she convinced me to sign over $200, $0 of the house's equity during our divorce, saying I was abandoning her and the kids, that I didn't care enough. She played the victim, crying, saying I was cold and distant. Meanwhile, she was out there, screwing around with Mark, planning her new life with my money. And now, after all that, I just found out she secretly bought a new home, another place with my money, no doubt, while still claiming I've abandoned her and the kids. It's like she's living a double life, and I was too blind or too trusting to see it. The betrayal stings worse than anything else. It's not just about the affair, it's about the lies, the manipulation, the way she's taken everything I worked for and used it against me. I feel like I've been played, used, and left with nothing but a broken heart and a pile of debts I didn't even know about. I don't know what to do now. Part of me still wants to believe there's some way to fix this, to save what's left of our marriage, but another part knows I can't trust her anymore. Not after this. Not after she lied about everything, about her feelings, about the house, about the affair. I feel so betrayed, so angry. I want to fight back, but I also just want to get out and start over. The thing is, even if I walk away, I'll be left picking up the pieces of a life she's shattered, all while she's out there, probably planning her next move, spending my money, pretending to be the innocent victim. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how I got here. How I let it go on so long without noticing. How I trusted someone who was secretly cheating on me with the guy who was supposed to help us buy our dream house. And now I'm left with this mess. Her lies, her manipulations, and the realization that I've been robbed in every sense of the word. I don't even know how to feel anymore. I just know I need to get some clarity before I do anything stupid. After discovering the messages and realizing the full extent of Lisa's betrayal, I was in a state of shock that I can't really put into words. It was like my entire world had been flipped upside down in a matter of seconds. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, feeling numb, trying to process what I'd just seen. My mind kept circling back to that message from Mark, the real estate guy who was supposed to help us buy a house, and instead was helping himself to my wife's affections. It was so sickening. I couldn't believe I'd been blind to it all. I knew I had to confront her. There was no way I could just pretend I didn't see. So I waited until she came home that evening. I kept my cool. At least I told myself I did. And when she walked in, I just handed her my phone, showing her the message. I didn't yell or scream, I just said, "Lisa, what the hell is this?" Her face twisted into a smirk like she expected me to be upset or maybe even guilty. She looked at the message, then at me, and shrugged. "It's nothing," she said, trying to brush it off. "Just some stupid flirtation. It doesn't mean anything." She was so dismissive, so casual about it, like she was talking about some minor inconvenience. I felt my blood boil. I told her I knew she'd been cheating, that I'd seen the messages, and that I wasn't going to accept her lies anymore. That's when she started her lies. She claimed she'd been having an affair because I was cold and distant, that I didn't show her love anymore, that she was just seeking comfort elsewhere. She even had the audacity to say she was stressed, that she needed someone to talk to, and that Mark was just a friend. But I knew better. I knew that was just her way of spinning things, trying to make herself look like the victim. Meanwhile, she was sneaking around behind my back, manipulating me into signing over a huge chunk of our house's equity, money she's now using to buy a new place. I found out later. The emotional impact hit me hard. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. I'd trusted her. I'd believed in us. And now I saw that she'd been planning her escape with my money and her lover all along. It was like I'd been played for a fool. I couldn't even cry, just felt this numbness spreading through my chest. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see her lying or sneaking around. But I also felt a deep, burning rage. I wanted to punch something to make her feel as small as she made me feel. I wanted to scream at her for the betrayal, for taking everything, our house, our savings, our future, and throwing it all away with some guy who was just a means to an end for her. I thought about all the plans we made, the vacations, the kids' education, the home we built. All of it was now tainted by her lies. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, going over everything. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her keep manipulating me. I had to think about my next move. I started looking into what legal options I had. It was clear she was planning to take everything she could get, especially after I found out she'd been pressuring me to sign over a bunch of the house's equity. She told me I was abandoning her and the kids, that I didn't care enough. But all I could think about was how she'd betrayed her vows, betrayed our family, and now was trying to turn everything around on me. The next morning, I decided I'd get a lawyer. I needed to understand my rights, what she was doing behind my back, and how to protect what's mine. I also started gathering evidence, screenshots of the messages, bank statements, anything that could prove her manipulation and her secret purchase of that new house. I couldn't believe she'd gone so far, spending my money on a new place while still pretending to be the innocent victim in her lies. Honestly, I felt like I was in some bad movie, but this was my life. I was angry, hurt, and confused all at once. I kept asking myself how I got here, how I missed all the signs, and how I was supposed to pick up the pieces now. The worst part was knowing she'd probably spin everything to her advantage, claiming I was a bad husband, that I abandoned her and the kids. But I knew the truth. I was the one who'd been betrayed, used, and left to pick up the shattered remains of what we once had. I was trying to stay calm, trying to think clearly, but inside, I was boiling with rage and heartbreak. After I started gathering evidence and planning my next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been played from the very beginning. It's one thing to discover an affair, but it's another to realize she'd been orchestrating her escape with my money all along. The more I dug into her recent financial moves, the more disgusted I became. I found out she'd been secretly buying a new house, another property with my money, no doubt, while she was still pretending to be the victim. It was like she'd been living a double life, and I was just a pawn in her game. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the bank statements and property records I'd pulled. It was surreal. She'd taken out a second mortgage on our original house, claiming she needed the cash for emergencies, but I knew better. She'd been funneling that money into a separate account, one I didn't even know existed. And then I saw the deed, her name on a brand new property, a house just outside the city. She bought it with my money, and I had no idea until I meticulously pieced everything together. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That's when I decided I had to confront her again, but this time with all the proof. I arranged to meet her at the house. I wanted to see her face when I laid it all out, how deep her lies went. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, maybe a little nervous. I showed her the bank statements, the deed, the mortgage documents. Her face paled. She tried to deny everything, spinning some story about how she'd needed a safe place for the kids or how she'd planned to tell me later. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I knew she'd been lying, that she'd been sneaking around and stealing from me. She snapped back, calling me paranoid, saying I was overreacting, that I was trying to control everything. She said she bought the house because she was worried about the future, that I didn't care about her or the kids. That was her favorite line, trying to make me feel guilty while she was out there screwing her way through our lives. But I saw right through her lies. I told her she was a manipulative bitch, that I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wanted her to admit what she'd done. She started crying, trying to play the victim again, claiming I'd abandoned her, that I didn't love her anymore, that she was just trying to keep the family together. It was all bullshit. She'd been playing me from the start, and now she was trying to spin it like I was the bad guy. I felt so angry, so betrayed, that I could barely contain myself. I told her she'd taken everything from me, our house, my money, my trust, and that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I'd fight to get everything back, and that I wanted her out of my life. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, wondering how I'd let it go so far. I'd always been the kind of guy who believed in working things out, who thought love could conquer all. But now I saw that she'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. She'd been planning her escape, and I was just a pawn in her game. My mind kept circling back to her new house, the money she'd stolen from us, and the fact that she was still pretending to be the innocent victim. I felt so furious, so helpless. The next day I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to understand my rights, especially concerning the house and the money she'd taken. I also started documenting everything: her lies, the texts, the financial transactions, the property deeds. I knew I had to be prepared for whatever legal battle was coming. I also reached out to a financial advisor, someone who could help me understand the full extent of her theft and what I could do to recover what was mine. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, trying to manipulate the narrative. She told friends and family I'd abandoned her and the kids, that I was a terrible husband who didn't care. I knew she'd spin it that way because she always did. But I also knew the truth. I knew she'd been lying, cheating, stealing, and trying to manipulate her way out of the mess she created. It was a sickening feeling, knowing I'd been so blind for so long. I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of heartbreak and anger. I loved my kids and I wanted to do right by them, but I couldn't trust Lisa anymore. I realized I had to focus on protecting myself and my future. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine: my dignity, my money, my life. I knew this was only the beginning of a long fight, but I was done being played. I was done being the fool. From now on, I was going to take control of this disaster, no matter how ugly it got. The legal process moved faster than I expected, and honestly, I wasn't prepared for how messy things would get. Once I handed over all my evidence, texts, bank statements, property deeds, the lawyer I hired started building a case. Lisa's story shifted almost immediately. She began claiming I was a terrible husband, that I'd abandoned the family, that I didn't care about the kids, all designed to paint me as the villain. But I had the facts on my side, and I made sure to keep everything documented. During the divorce proceedings, she tried every trick in the book to gain the upper hand. She claimed I was emotionally abusive, that I'd been neglecting her and the kids. She even brought in a counselor to support her story, but I knew it was just her way of trying to manipulate the court. Meanwhile, I was fighting to keep the house, or at least the equity I was entitled to. I wanted that money back, every penny she'd stolen or manipulated out of me. The thing that angered me most was her outright lies about how I'd abandoned her and the kids. I was working late, yes, but I was trying to hold everything together. The most shocking part came when I found out she'd bought the new house with the money she'd stolen. She claimed she'd been saving it for the kids' future, but it was clear she'd been planning her escape for months. When I confronted her about it, she just smirked and said she deserved it, like I was some villain for catching her. I remember feeling this deep sense of betrayal, seeing her act so innocent while she was out there shopping for a new life with my money. The court hearings were intense. I had to fight hard to prove that she'd been manipulating the finances, that she'd lied about her intentions and her spending. I had to show proof that she'd been planning this whole time, that she'd been secretly acquiring property while pretending to be the faithful wife. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her get away with stealing everything I worked for. The judge eventually ordered her to return a significant portion of the money, and I was awarded temporary custody of the kids, something I was relieved about, but also devastated because I knew she spun it to look like I was the bad guy. Throughout all this, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and heartbreak. I was glad the truth was coming out, but it hurt knowing I'd lost so much trust and security. I kept thinking about how she'd lied to me every step of the way, how she'd manipulated everyone around her. It was like I'd been living next to a stranger, one who was willing to destroy everything we built for her own gain. The kids, of course, were caught in the middle of it all. Lisa tried to turn their innocence against me, claiming I'd abandoned them, that I didn't want to be part of their lives. But when I saw them, I knew I had to fight harder, not just for the money, but for their future too. As the months went on, I started to rebuild my life. I focused on the legal battles, on protecting what was left of my assets, and on being there for my kids. I also realized I'd learned a lot about trust and betrayal. Never again would I take someone's word at face value. Never again would I ignore the small signs of deception. Lisa's betrayal ran deep, and it showed me just how fragile the foundation of a marriage can be when one person is secretly planning their escape with your hard-earned money. One thing I noticed during this whole mess is how many people underestimate how deeply betrayal can cut. It's not just about the money or the house. It's about the trust you lose in someone you thought you knew. I used to believe in the idea of till death do us part. But now I see that sometimes people change, and their true colors come out only when it's too late. Still, I'm trying to move forward. I've cut ties with Lisa completely. I want my peace, my stability, and most of all, I want to be a good father to my kids, something I refuse to let her ruin. Looking back, I realize I was naive to think that love and trust were enough. I was blind to the warning signs, and now I'm paying the price. But I also know I'm stronger than I thought. I survived her lies, her manipulations, and her theft. I'm still standing, and I'm determined to rebuild my life from the ground up. I just wish I'd seen it coming sooner. Maybe then I wouldn't have been so by her betrayal. But now I see everything clearly, and that's the only thing that matters. The aftermath of everything was a whirlwind I never expected to be caught in. Even after the legal battles started to settle, I felt like I was still spinning from the shock of how deeply Lisa had betrayed me. The court ordered her to return most of the money she'd stolen, and I managed to secure a fair share of the house's equity. But honestly, no amount of money or legal victory could undo the emotional damage. Every time I looked at my kids, I felt this lingering ache, knowing the woman they trusted and loved was the same woman who had lied and manipulated everything around her. I had to keep reminding myself that I was doing this for them, for my future, and for my own sanity. The hardest part was watching Lisa try to spin her version of events to anyone who'd listen. She claimed I was a terrible husband, that I'd abandoned her and the kids, that I was the one responsible for her desperate actions. She painted herself as the victim, a martyr trying to keep her family together. But I knew better. I knew the truth, that she'd been planning her escape for months, secretly buying a new house with my money and lying to everyone about her difficulties. Despite the chaos, I managed to get some space to breathe. I started working on myself, focusing on healing and rebuilding my confidence. I found a new job that paid better, and I threw myself into it. I also began therapy, trying to process everything I'd been through, how I'd been played, how I'd lost trust, and how I'd been by someone I'd loved for so long. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it for my own sake and to be there for my kids. One unexpected thing that happened was Lisa's attempts to guilt me into dropping the legal fight. She kept calling, crying, saying how much she needed me, how she'd changed, and how she was sorry for everything. It was classic manipulation, trying to make me feel responsible for her choices, but I'd learned my lesson. I didn't fall for it anymore. I told her I was done playing her game. I wanted nothing to do with her lies or her false apologies. I only cared about protecting my kids and making sure I didn't get pulled back into her web of deceit. I also started rebuilding my relationship with the kids. It was tough at first. They were confused and hurt, caught between two worlds. Lisa kept trying to paint a picture of me as the villain, but I made sure they saw the truth through my actions. I took them out, spent quality time, and reassured them that I loved them and would always be there. I knew I couldn't undo what Lisa had done, but I could at least give them some stability, some sense that they were still loved and cared for. Looking back, I realized that betrayal cuts deeper than I ever thought possible. It's one thing to be cheated on. It's another to have your trust shattered, your finances manipulated, and your entire life turned upside down. The most painful part was feeling so helpless, seeing the woman I loved turn into this manipulative stranger, and knowing I couldn't do anything about it at first. But I learned that even in the darkest moments, you have to stand up for yourself. You have to fight for what's right, even if it means losing someone you once thought was your forever. Now I'm slowly putting the pieces back together. I'm more cautious, more aware of the signs I once ignored. I'm also more grateful for what I still have, my kids, my health, my dignity. I've realized that sometimes people reveal their true colors only when it's too late. And while I wish I could erase the pain, I know it's part of my story now. It's made me stronger, more resilient. And I refuse to let her betrayal define me. Honestly, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I won't be fooled again. I'll take my time healing, rebuilding my life, and making sure my kids know they're loved unconditionally. That's all I can do now. The scars will fade, but the lessons will stay with me forever. And I'll never again ignore the warning signs of someone's true intentions. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that trust must be earned. And sometimes, it's better to walk away before you get hurt even more. Looking back now, I realize I've come a long way from that naive guy who thought he had everything figured out. Betrayal with Lisa was a brutal wake-up call, one I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it also forced me to confront the harsh reality that trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something that has to be earned and maintained. In her case, it was shattered beyond repair, and I had to learn how to pick up the pieces on my own. One of the hardest lessons I learned is that people can hide their true selves behind a mask for a long time. Lisa was so good at pretending to be the loving wife and caring mother, until she was. The woman I thought I knew was just a facade that cracked the moment her real intentions surfaced. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. It made me question everything about our marriage, about who I was trusting, and about what I thought was real. But despite all the pain, I've found a kind of clarity that I never had before. I understand now that I can't control other people's actions, only how I respond to them. I've learned to set boundaries, financial, emotional, and personal, and to stick to them. I've also learned that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Protecting myself and my kids became my top priority. I refuse to be a victim of her lies anymore. The experience has changed me. I'm more cautious, yes, but also more aware of my worth. I no longer take for granted the people who truly care about me. I'm more attentive to the small signs that might indicate someone isn't genuine. And I understand that forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about releasing the anger and pain so I can move forward. I've forgiven myself for trusting her for so long, and I've forgiven her for what she did, because holding on to that anger only kept me stuck. Most importantly, I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I survived the most devastating betrayal I could imagine, and I came out the other side. I still have scars, but they're reminders of what I've endured and how I've grown. I want to tell anyone going through something similar: don't let the betrayal define you. Use it as a lesson, a catalyst for change. Take control of your life, set your boundaries, and don't be afraid to walk away from what no longer serves you. And to anyone who might be in a similar situation, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags. It's better to face the truth early than to lose everything in the end. Love is built on honesty and respect. If those are missing, then everything else crumbles. Protect yourself, your heart, and your future. Because in the end, the only person who truly matters is you. And you deserve to be with someone who values that as much as you do.